I'm a big fan of legalization. Yeah, obviously. Boom, and we're live. Dude. Yeah. You like the edibles to go to sleep, right? Half a hit. That's what you need, like just a little, just where you're like, okay. It's definitely not crazy. No. It's marijuana. It's legal. It's good for you. Sitting up here with these jumbo sprays, the breast crank.
Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to my channel 5149, where I talk business, politics, and society. And today we're going to talk about Joe Rogan. And why is it that mainstream media, specifically the more liberal outlets like CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and the like, why they deeply despise a figure like Joe Rogan and will seemingly stop at nothing to tarnish his legitimacy and his reputation.
Joni Mitchell is joining fellow singer-songwriter Neil Young in asking for her music to be removed from Spotify. The musicians are protesting against the streaming service, saying it's spreading misinformation about COVID vaccines by featuring the Joe Rogan Experience podcast.
The question here is why? Why is Joe Rogan the hill that these people want to die on? Spotify chose Joe Rogan over Neil Young. I'll choose Apple Music over Spotify. Goodbye, Spotify. Apple Music has a conscience. No, they don't. Both Spotify and Apple are profit-maximizing firms. Also, in case you didn't know, multiple Apple suppliers in China have links to forced labor programs. How's that for conscience? This isn't the focus of my video, but recently I've seen some capitalist critiques made about Spotify, like this opinion piece in The Guardian. Oh, all Spotify cares about is money. That's why they're choosing Joe Rogan over Neil Young. They don't have any morals, ethics, and they don't care about their reputation, yada, yada. Yeah, that's 100% true, but that pretty much describes every publicly listed company, in my opinion.
Kat, you wrote on Twitter about Spotify. You went viral for a comment about it yesterday. Tell us your point of view first about this Spotify mess, because it's really dominated the week.
Yeah, what I think is interesting about the backlash against Spotify vis-a-vis Joe Rogan is that, people are fundamentally angry about not being able to stop his audience from wanting news that is bad for them, wanting something that's bad for them. So, we're all haunted by the specter of this guy who's listening to Joe Rogan and internalizing this bad information and making bad choices as a result.
And there it is. Mainstream outlets, up until very recently, have had almost a monopoly power in determining which piece of news is considered good for you and which piece of news is considered bad for you. But they're rapidly losing that power. So a part of their agenda, a portion of their coverage, is dedicated to convincing their viewers, you, that it's the righteous thing to do to defend traditional media, the institution itself, and the orthodox ideas that they endorse against challenges from the outside, against ideas that could be considered heterodox, meaning ideas not conforming with accepted or orthodox standards or beliefs. And Joe Rogan's podcast, where he has these 2-3 hour conversations with people, political and apolitical, kicking around different ideas from my experience, some pretty reasonable ideas, some insanely absurd ideas, that falls outside of orthodoxy. Like I can imagine Neil Young and Joni Mitchell and some others now must feel that they are sacrificing their career a little bit for a kind of noble cause against disinformation. But what is disinformation? In his recent Substack post, Glenn Greenwald writes, quote, "Constitutional literacy to the side, the hate speech framework for justifying censorship is now insufficient because liberals are eager to silence a much broader range of voices than those they can credibly accuse of being hateful. That is why the newest and now most popular censorship framework is to claim that their targets are guilty of spreading misinformation or disinformation. These terms by design have no clear or concise meaning, like the term terrorism. It is their elasticity that makes them so useful." Glenn Greenwald, pretty astute observations, and this is also something that Joe Rogan himself has pointed out regarding all of this recent controversy.
The problem I have with the term misinformation, especially today, is that many of the things that we thought of as misinformation just a short while ago are now accepted as fact. Like, for instance, 8 months ago, if you said, if you get vaccinated, you can still catch COVID and you can still spread COVID, you would be removed from social media. They would ban you from certain platforms. Now, that's accepted as fact. If you said, I don't think cloth masks work, you would be banned from social media. Now, that's openly and repeatedly stated on CNN. If you said, I think it's possible that COVID-19 came from a lab, you'd be banned from many social media platforms. Now, that's on the cover of Newsweek. All of those theories that at one point in time were banned were openly discussed by those two men that I had on my podcast that have been accused of dangerous misinformation.
Right? None of this makes any sense. And from my perspective, there's not really a credible reason why we can't, at the very least, talk about this stuff. So why is there such a strong push for this type of authoritarian censorship? Glenn Greenwald again. Given the climate prevailing in the American liberal faction, this authoritarianism is anything but surprising. For those who convince themselves that they are not battling mere political opponents with a different ideology, but a fascist movement led by a Hitler-like figure bent on imposing totalitarianism, a core defining belief of modern-day Democratic Party politics, it is virtually inevitable that they will embrace authoritarianism. When a political movement is subsumed by fear, the Orange Hitler will put you in camps and end democracy if he wins again, then it is not only expected but even rational to embrace authoritarian tactics, including censorship, to stave off this existential threat. Fear always breeds authoritarianism, which is why manipulating and stimulating that human instinct is the favorite tactic of political demagogues. Referencing Hitler always brings about pretty visceral images, but my 2 cents is that corporate capture of American politics is making it so that it is now virtually impossible for either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party to actually represent normal people. And that has made it so that fear is now the only tool that they and their respective media ecosystems can use to turn out the vote.
Rogan is like a weed that sprang up outside the mainstream media ecosystem, and he thrived there, and he has this huge audience. And that's what's really scary, that Spotify could kick him off tomorrow and it wouldn't make a dent. It wouldn't make a dent in his audience. People would still listen to him. And crucially, they still wouldn't trust more mainstream media sources. And I think that's what's really, really frightening to people.
And I think that sentiment is the crux of this whole crusade against Joe Rogan. They cannot stop him, and they are freaking out. You know, if Spotify deplatforms him, he'll just go somewhere else where he will gain even more infamy. The obsession with Rogan within elite media is leading it down a perilous road in which it's now resorting to inventing its own wildly distorted interpretations of discussions on Rogan's show, an effort that is clearly targeted at tarnishing Rogan's legitimacy and reputation and imposing the same type of controls on his platform that they enjoy imposing over vast swaths of discussion and debate throughout the country's more mainstream institutions. What a great irony of the day. You know, in their zealous attempt to destroy Joe Rogan, mainstream media will themselves engage in disinformation. Take the fiasco related to Rogan's use of ivermectin. The entire news media linking arms to mock as, quote, horse dewormer, a drug that absolutely should not be taken to treat COVID-19, but which absolutely is not accurately referred to as horse dewormer, is a perfect illustration of the mutually parasitic equilibrium between the liberal media and its antagonists. The term became a clever meme for 3 days for the former and permanent proof of the media's duplicity for the latter. Progressives won the Twitter trending topic sidebar, while their critics won the ability to reference one of the most embarrassing displays in media conformity and thoughtlessness I can imagine. That is something. I mean, you have a CNN news show called Reliable Sources spewing out fake news with a specific political agenda in mind, taking no responsibility for doing so. And then you have the Joe Rogan Experience, an entertainment podcast with no ties to any power source other than the show's audience. They are in the process of being exiled and banished. I think the shittiness of this whole thing is that we are being manipulated to being pawns in this whole game. You, me, Neil Young. Quote, one could easily envision a tipping point being reached where a musician no longer makes an anti-Rogan statement by leaving the platform, as Young and Mitchell just did, but instead will be accused of harboring pro-Rogan sentiments if they stay on Spotify. Prince Harry was under pressure to cut ties with Spotify yesterday after the streaming giant was accused of promoting anti-vax content. Right? I think this whole thing is blown out of proportion. You know, to me, Joe Rogan is a figure who should neither be villainized to the degree he has been by his detractors, nor lionized in the way that he has been by his supporters.
I'm not trying to promote misinformation. I'm not trying to be controversial. I've never tried to do anything with this podcast other than just talk to people and have interesting conversations. The podcast started off as just fucking around with my friends and having fun and talking. And then when it became popular, other people wanted to come on, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool to talk to that person. Oh, he's interesting. Oh, she's got a cool book out. And then boom, it's become what it is today, which is like some out of control juggernaut that I barely have control of. So my pledge to you is that I will do my best to try to balance out these more controversial viewpoints with other people's perspectives so we can maybe find a better point of view. I don't want to just show the contrary opinion to what the narrative is. I want to show all kinds of opinions so that we can all figure out what's going on, and not just about COVID, about everything, about health, about fitness, wellness, the state of the world itself.
Can you imagine sounding pretty reasonable like that, and you have about half the media trying to exile you? And it's because they're playing a different game. They have a different agenda. You know, their goal isn't to have conversations, interesting conversations, or diversity of thought. Their goal is to shut down everything that doesn't align with their pre-prescribed values, especially if they come from places outside of their insular ecosystem. So despite Joe Rogan's capitulation, I'd call that video kind of capitulating, this might be just the beginning of a movement, an effort to silence people like Joe Rogan, because there is no possible way they can let him be the guy that he wants to be. And this is a quote from Freddie deBoer. Joe Rogan, just a guy ambling cheerfully through life, talking to cool people and smoking some good weed, not meaning to hurt anybody, but just asking questions, serving his curiosity as he sees fit, even if he steps on somebody's toes, never meaning no harm, good-natured, clumsy, a little callous, a little loud. Because in the end, I think there are a lot of messed up things out there that do require our attention. I'm talking about the things that we discuss on this channel all the time: corporate crime, corrupt politicians, and a media ecosystem that is incapable of informing the populace. And those are my jumbled thoughts for this week. You know, it's something that's been in the back of my mind for a while. Why is there this coordinated crusade against Joe Rogan? You know, it didn't quite make sense in my head until it did. And it's all about power and control. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about Rogan. He seems to be a polarizing figure, maybe because the media has made him into such a figure. Anyway, agree or disagree, please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, share the video with your friends and family. Please consider subscribing and also hitting that notification bell icon so you don't miss any of my future videos. As always, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you next week.